Welcome back to the Opposition Podcast, where you can catch up. Now, this is episode 3. These are still numbers I can count. Here with Rukshan, you can catch up with our previous episodes at theopposition.show. Rukshan, interesting night tonight.
Interesting night indeed. We're actually coming live, guys. So if you're noticing any issues with the audio, let us know, just so we can make sure our mics and everything are synced up. It seems to be okay, but with a live stream, you never know. But today we've got a very interesting guest joining us, and also, we're going to be covering a very topic that's currently in the news. So, of course, many of you have been following the news, would know about Ben Robert Smith, Australian soldier, maybe perhaps our most decorated soldier in modern times, but due to a defamation trial, commonly now referred to as a murderer and a war criminal.
By the mainstream media.
By the mainstream media, of course. And we're going to go over some of the case, not in too much detail, but more related to what's recently been found. So I'm just going to read some of the statements given by the judge, his findings, just to give you an idea of where we're at with the case. And the full findings are actually released today. So the judge found that Robert Smith murdered an unarmed and defenseless Afghan civilian, Ali Jan, in September 2012 by kicking him off a cliff and procuring soldiers under his command to shoot him. He broke the moral and legal rules of military engagement and is therefore a criminal. He disgraced his country, Australia, and the Australian Army by his conduct as a member of the SAS in Afghanistan. He committed another murder on Easter Sunday 2009 by pressuring a newly deployed and inexperienced SAS soldier to execute an elderly unarmed Afghan soldier in order to blood the rookie. He committed a third murder by machine gunning a man with a prosthetic leg on the Easter Sunday mission. He was so callous and inhumane that he took the prosthetic leg back to Australia and encouraged his soldiers to use it as a novelty beer-drinking vessel. As a deputy commander of the 2009 SAS patrol on Easter Sunday, he acquiesced in the execution of an unarmed Afghan by a junior trooper in his patrol. He bullied a fellow soldier, person 1. In 2010, he bashed an unarmed Afghan in the face with his fist, in the stomach with his knee, and in so doing alarmed 2 patrol commanders to the extent that they ordered him to back off. As a patrol commander, in 2012, he authorized the assault of an unarmed Afghan who was being held in custody and posed no threat. He assaulted an unarmed Afghan in 2012. So that's quite a list there, and obviously that's from the judge's summary. And we're just going to kind of cover that with our guest. And Avi, do you want to bring our guest on?
Our special guest tonight, I think very appropriately, is somebody that I've interviewed a few times in Victoria, a war hero in his own right, Heston Russell. Heston, how you doing, mate?
Hey, g'day, Jordan. Thanks for having me on. Good to be on.
Well, welcome. I hope he sounds all right there.
I think it's all right. Heston, maybe just speak a little bit louder.
I'll try.
And to the audience, of course, you can catch up on these podcasts at theopposition.show. Have your comments, have your say on Facebook or on YouTube, and we'll bring in some of those comments, especially the interesting ones. But Heston, to begin with, just tell us, what's your response to those findings today?
Hey, so I'm not going to be on here and defend anyone's innocence. I'm sort of defending the process and where we're at. And I first conducted a press conference in the Senate courtyard in 2020, posted Burton Report when all this happened, just in absolute disgust of where we're at as a nation, that we're having such serious allegations of war crimes and everything else being played out in courts of defamation, in civil courts, where the requirements of truth and evidence are not beyond reasonable doubt. And that's been this whole situation with the Ben Robert Smith defamation case. Everyone's saying he brought it upon himself, he initiated this. This is literally the only recourse we have to call out and try and hold the media accountable for what they say. And the media only has to prove themselves to a level of truth or contextual truth or substantive truth beyond the balance of probabilities, or above the balance of probabilities, not beyond reasonable doubt. So all these media accusations saying he's a war criminal and all these sorts of things, he hasn't been charged for war crimes. He hasn't been found guilty of war crimes. All that we simply have is currently a massive pile-on, and there's absolutely things that Rukshan's mentioned that I believe should be passed on to this Office of the Special Investigator that was stood up under the Morrison government from the AFP to specifically investigate these circumstances and the incredibly unique context of these incidents during wartime in Special Forces counterinsurgency operations in Afghanistan, outside of press conferences out front of the federal court in Sydney.
I think it's an interesting fact. I've served, I've seen combat, and I laugh when I see, and I don't know, you probably do as well, but when I see every expert sitting at home and judging these matters, there's people trolling me because I defended Ben Roberts a year ago in the case. But I find it so bizarre that people sit in the safety of their home thinking they know anything about what you see on the ground during conflict. From your experience, I didn't serve in Afghanistan. From your experience, can you describe a bit of that? And have you ever come across the Victorian Cross? Was a hero a few days ago.
Yeah.
Did you ever cross paths with him? And
so we were deployed at the same time in 2012.
Lost
and
your sound.
You still got me?
Yeah. Oh, got you.
Yeah. So we were deployed.
I can't hear him.
That's all right.
It's working. Yeah.
You don't have to. All right. We'll just talk. You can't hear me, Arby?
Issues here. I haven't got any sound.
I'll answer you.
Oh, there we go.
You got me? Cool.
We got you.
So we were deployed at the same time under Special Operations Task Group Rotation 18, and I sort of said to you before off air that one of the most unique parts of this is some of those allegations came out of the period when we were combined as a Special Operations Task Group pursuing the murderer Hekmatullah, who had just murdered 3 Australians in a green on blue attack. He was inside the base wearing an Afghan National Army uniform and part of that team that was being trained, and he grabbed an AK and killed 3 Australians. And Hugh Pote, the father of Robert Pote, has actually spoken out in the last few days trying to provide some of that context. So going back to what you were saying, Avi, there is no excuse for war crimes. There is no excuse for deliberately and planning to go out there and commit harm to people who are innocent. But there is a complete set of circumstances that the Australian public simply is not being educated on outside of these sensational headlines. That is the realities of what everyone loves to, profess about, the fog of war. The heat of battle. The heat of battle is the Saving Private Ryan coming over the trench and the enemy throws down their weapons and put their hands up and they still shoot them, and that's the heat of battle. The fog of war is this great, Clausewitzian prophecy. And I'll say to you, the fog of war starts when you're first deployed to Afghanistan and just grows thicker and thicker and thicker every time you're deployed over there, because you're fighting an enemy that all of a sudden is shooting at you and laying IEDs. And next thing is a farmer, and we would go along and we would swab their hands and find explosive residue all over them. But you know what? They were unarmed civilians right there and then. We were chasing people trying to find this Hekmatullah dude and tracking him and the people who were supporting him trying to get out of Pakistan. And we were going to those villages where he had been, and no one had seen him, and he'd been in that village for hours and hours on end. And you sort of have this national strategic importance to track down this guy who had just murdered 3 Australians. Now, that doesn't excuse anything that breaches the laws of armed conflict. But that's just some of the incredible context that I would love to see any of these keyboard warriors or journalists sitting back comfortably writing these headlines or critiquing or judging, and see how they would hold up in those situations and those circumstances, particularly if they were the ones who had to then make practical, tactical decisions on the ground with that strategic importance weighing down on them, surrounded by insurgents, IEDs, everything else in between, and having been there on multiple rotations where you've literally seen your friends killed by people who at one stage were unarmed civilians but went and took up weapons or detonated IEDs. It's just such a unique set of circumstances that is so hard. And I said this, Avi, when Afghanistan, and I found myself in the media so much talking about answering the questions, was it worth it? The greatest strategic failing of our entire commitment, national commitment to Afghanistan, is that the general doesn't know what we did. And the general public is left here and now still trying to understand these circumstances. And us as the veteran community are still trying to educate them, waving against this tide of other media who have their own agendas to prove their own stories. And you know what? I'm going to quickly say this. You've heard the journalists like Nick McKenzie and Chris Masters talk about justice, justice, justice. No one has been charged of war crimes. No one has been found guilty of war crimes. And when I've been speaking out saying this needs to be saved for the threshold of evidence in a criminal court beyond reasonable doubt, and I've had ABC journalists and all the rest say, trying to suppress freedom of speech, freedom of journalism, why are they so scared of their work if they truly care about justice and not stories or awards to have to meet the threshold of beyond reasonable doubt? Why are they willing to settle for a pass conceded with a 51% beyond the balance of probabilities? That is the real joke. Any journalist worth their quality should be willing to have their work saved and tested beyond reasonable doubt to achieve true justice. Because as we know, how is Ben Roberts-Smith going to have a fair trial if he is now required to go to a criminal court before a jury?
That's a good point.
No, it's a very good point. And I mean, just on the media as well, obviously we have this thing with the media where, a lot of it's to do with not just Ben Roberts-Smith, it's to do with the whole Australian identity, the entire military. And this is just one of the articles that I've come across recently. And, it says, as the Ben Roberts-Smith case proves, it's time for Australia to abandon our farcical Anzac myths.
Where's this from?
Let me
take a guess. I didn't look at the screen. It's probably a far right publication like The Guardian.
That's right. It's from The Guardian. And another far-right publication we have here from Crikey, how Ben Roberts-Smith's disgrace could inspire a national reckoning. And of course, it's not just in Australia. This is kind of getting covered overseas as well, like Australia's reputation, and the imputation it has towards war crimes.
That Guardian article has done the rounds in the veteran community, and it's just done so much damage already. And this is where you see people jumping on board with their premeditated agendas. Like Ben Roberts-Smith still won a Victoria Cross and still won a Medal of Gallantry through actions that have not come into question during these whole proceedings. You can't cover his entire career through these accusations and allegations and findings that are at the beyond the balance of probabilities when there are still been, those accolades, those achievements, that valor that has reached the highest levels within our nation.
Well, you see these journalists just come out like Mackenzie, but also it's like they were so happy they won the jackpot that they get to crap all over everything Australian, and people that are willing to, risk their lives, get hurt, put their, watch their friends.
The collateral damage they are causing at the moment just to prove their own point. And this is, like I said before, they're churching on about justice. No one's been charged. No one's been convicted. All they care about is the fact that they have been allowed to say these things publicly.
To abandon a farcical Anzac myths. That's The Guardian. This is not about Ben Roberts. This is an attack on every veteran. This is an attack on anyone that's ever served. You know what?
That's what the veteran community is feeling at the moment.
But Heston, like one of the points I've seen made by these reporters who are working on this case is that this was done with the help of SAS itself, and there's veterans behind them as well.
I'm with
you.
And this,
how do you square that up?
I'm not defending Ben's innocence or otherwise. I am rejecting the process, and as a part of that process, Ben Fordham actually did an excellent interview with Nick McKenzie. And when Nick was saying these brave SAS soldiers who've had to come forward and do this, they were all subpoenaed to appear in court, and members were provided with immunity from their own actions in order to be able to testify against Ben Roberts-Smith. You'll note in one of those particular examples, Proven Truth, where Ben allegedly kicked the guy off the cliff and then allegedly got one of his men to shoot him in the head. The guy who allegedly shot him in the head testified against Ben and said he did that and received a letter that said he would not be prosecuted for what he said. So these are these very, very unique circumstances, people. And some of those people who also testified, or one of those people who also testified against Ben Roberts-Smith, was on the record to say that he was apparently nominated for a Victoria Cross during the same action that Ben received his Victoria Cross and never received it. And having been to combat and seen the joke that is the honours and awards system, and having that then perpetuate with resentment over 10, 11, 12 years, don't tell me there isn't personal beef between these people, because I know
guess
there
that was
is.
going to be that was one of my next questions. You know, I can't imagine.
And that's what I'm saying. This just has to go before a criminal court, not a civil proceeding. That is all that I'm saying.
Yeah, you know, you just can't imagine the dynamics there, and whatever falling.
You know this, Arby. Combat is exposing, mate. Some people who think they are the duck's nuts get out there and they're not. Because when you're confronted with your own mortality, you never know how you're going to react until it actually happens. And that's the simple fact of the matter.
Yeah, it's I thought I would be pretty brave, to be honest. And I shat myself. I'm not ashamed to admit it. Combat is the scariest thing I've done in my life, and you don't realize, you think you can do all these things until somebody's firing at you and you feel like this is the end of your life tonight.
Yeah.
And I've been in that situation, and I remember it was always the quietest guy in the class that was always somehow like the toughest for real, and it was the big loudmouthed avies that were most scared. But it's a reality, and I find it so
that dynamic, mate. So like, people have workplace disagreements. You know, people are in court for workplace disagreements all the time. Everyone thinks that because we're all special forces, like we went over there in groups of 10, 20, 30, 40 on multiple rotations. You're living in each other's pockets for 5 months. You know, my platoon did 67 missions in 5 months, killed 117 insurgents, captured so many more. We didn't all get along. You know what? Because you just can't all get along. We're doing such real, exposing, accountable, authentic stuff. At the height of someone stuffs up or someone stuffs up in their job, it could cost you your life. People had arguments. People didn't get along. And I have seen that for the last 10 years.
There's that code that's supposed to be there, and they talked about it. I saw Channel 9.
Yeah, but it's been exploited, Arby. It's been exploited by these journalists who have found one loose end and start pulling it and promise and protect these people and pay these people, including Afghans, to come and testify.
Were the Afghans paid?
Well, as a bare minimum, their travel costs and a lot of other stuff was. You know, there's documented evidence of money going out.
When you look at it, the strongest evidence that they provided, again, in the context of a defamation civil trial, not a criminal trial, is his comrades, his mates, the boys from the... Now, I couldn't imagine people in my unit turning on me. It's something that seems... It does seem bizarre. What's the veteran community? And what's your take on it? So these people that did come and testify against him, and we saw Channel 9 try to destroy him by playing back, you know, obviously pre-planned. They had the recording, so they planned these phone calls. What's your take on it all?
Yeah, mate. And look, everyone has their story to be told, and I wasn't there for all these different incidents. And for these guys, you know, to feel that they have had to come forward and say that, like, that's where they have my absolute respect as well, because I don't know the full circumstances of it. But that's why all I'm just saying is it has to be tried and tested. And I just know from firsthand experience, there's so much more that goes into these. And I said before on a video I recorded, you know, there's a known psychological consideration where all of us can watch the same car crash and give completely different accounts because we have recognized the physiological and psychological impact that has. And then we're talking about repeated exposure to potential trauma through combat, everything else in between. And then I've seen that be harnessed and weaponized by those in the media, exploited, and then showcased in this trial by public opinion, where people have literally felt compelled to probably continue with something that they would probably prefer to pull out of. As one dude, I think he even said during his testimony. So my whole piece, mate, is just, it's such a mess, and we've made it even more of a mess, that because we haven't required it to be proven beyond reasonable doubt, we've allowed it to breach the lowest thresholds of evidence, and we're sort of reaping the rewards of that.
I mean, Heston, how did it become, you would think something as serious as war crimes allegations, particularly in a theater of war itself, would necessitate a special type of system to adjudicate if whether that happened or not. And we are now in a situation where members of the public are calling someone a war criminal and a murderer based on something that
and
is
they're loving it. They're like saying they're you see everybody when they say it, they're really like, he's a war criminal.
Yeah,
now.
I mean, they're saying it with a lot of anger and passion, and it seems though, like we've been discussing this whole time, it's not in a court where actually, we have to prove it beyond a reasonable doubt that this actually happened. So, how did it become that way, where the military is kind of standing by and it's okay for this to actually play out like this? You might have touched on this previously, but that's what I find really really hard to kind of reckon with as an individual that's not has any experience in the military like both of you do. How does it happen where it's almost like the soldiers are being left behind by the system itself?
Point. Yeah, and again, I literally did a press conference with Jackie Lambie and Glenn Kolomitz in the Senate courtyard in December 2020. And all that I simply called for, by this time, the Burton report had been released, and the government said they were standing up the Office of the Special Investigator to specifically research any and all allegations of war crimes. And for me, that's the point where, hey, we've stood up this special body to do that. So therefore, all accusations and allegations need to stop and need to be passed over to meet that threshold of evidence and investigation, because even the Burton report itself only found credible information. It did not find evidence that met any thresholds of evidence to be held up in court. So the issue here is with the government, and is absolutely with the Defence Force for not stepping up to petition the government, to lobby the government, to implore the government to establish the chain of due process as being the evidentiary standards of the Office of the Special Investigator. Look, we literally have taxpayer-funded media outlets still continuing on war crimes investigations, parallel to the Office of the Special Investigator, which is taxpayer-funded. And as taxpayers, we're literally paying the bill twice at two different standards of evidence as opposed to one. And all that again demonstrates is our government's lack of paying respect to what our servicemen and women should be afforded, and that's due process beyond reasonable doubt.
Yeah, because I personally feel, in terms of I think Channel 9 or the media that was looking after their witnesses, they got pretty good treatment in terms of, I'm talking about the people in Afghanistan, their witnesses that they brought across and all this kind of stuff. Yeah. They've been treated in a nice and respectful manner by that organization, whereas our soldiers themselves, it's like they're being thrown out to the wolves.
Yeah, absolutely. They're being thrown under the bus. The point is, and I think Heston's making a good point, is that right now he's either got to be charged in a criminal court and proven that really this is true, or they've got to come out and defend him.
Yeah, one of the things got to happen, right?
You can't have it both. You can't have trial by the media, and so this has been trial by the media.
What happens now? Like, you almost ask for his sake that he needs to be charged for this to be actually brought to that threshold. What happens if he gets charged and is found to be not guilty?
Yeah, exactly.
All of a sudden, then it is defamation.
It goes back. It does.
All doubt.
They will no longer be able to say that. So it works in his favor if he is charged, if he's not guilty of those crimes. And
how much of a mess have the wave, the pyramid piles worth of headlines and editorial pieces that have come out in the last week will all have to be retracted or at least corrected.
What's Nick McKenzie going to do?
Go back to Afghanistan. So he was literally in Afghanistan last month conducting more interviews with families in Kabul. And you know what the delicious part these media don't know, and this is where I'm going to get myself in trouble. It's our former soldiers have to provide them with security when they go over there and report back to
It's
us.
what?
It's our former soldiers and our mates and our friends from the American.
But private contractors now there.
Yeah. They think they're smart. We know what they're doing. I hope he's watching. Part of my issue with all of this, Arby, is I actually have my own little podcast, Voice of a Veteran podcast, and I've been reached out to by members of the Australian Afghan community who are really concerned because there's currently some Australians over in Afghanistan filming their own documentary. A reputable journalist who's linked up with another guy who, in my opinion, has been radicalized by the Taliban and are bringing out all these new accusations of new war crimes. And I sat down with him and recorded a podcast, a video interview, as he sat there and told me about all of these war crimes that he'd been told about and he was going to publish in this documentary. And I took him on that same journey. I was like, so did you see any war crimes? No, but these happened. How did they happen? Because somebody told me. So those some people who told you, are they some people telling you in Afghanistan with the Taliban in control? So not only do they look to receive support from the government who would love them attacking us, but also potentially receive reparations because our government said they're going to pay reparations to people, through to elevation on an international standard from a suffering and underdeveloped country by coming forward and getting some media attention. And then I told him, like, what is a priority to you? Justice? So therefore, you're not going to publish this and damage my community further, because he had no individual names or allegations. It was special forces, so it's 3,500 people, or it's Australians in Afghanistan, which is up to 26,000 people. So are you more interested in publishing a headline that'll get nowhere but damage us all? Or are you actually going to take it to the Office of the Special Investigator and have them investigate to corroborate? He finished the podcast saying he would probably do the latter, but I've got that saved up and ready. And this is what is happening. Journalists are now, vigilante journalists, people with agendas are jumping on this stuff, knowing that they just need to be able to defend it.
For clout. It's become cool. It's become cool to shit on, our war heroes.
I mean, with our history of involvement in that area.
It's the cowards in the playground who have, the kids who actually went out there and did the work or could actually defend themselves are being told to sit in the corners and sit on their hands unless they can afford to go to defamation proceedings. Well, the other kids are allowed to pick up sticks and stones and throw at them all day and be told it's not going to break their bones. But what it does is impacts the mental health of our entire community and our families so bad that Special Forces veterans are removing their work experience from their resumes. If they ever served in SAS, they're having these conversations in their workplaces. Even though they performed magnificently, risked their lives, lost their mates. This is the repercussions of these headlines calling for the entire Anzac myth to be reviewed by these agenda-driven Muppets.
Yeah, I guess, with our whole history in that region, in Afghanistan, in those wars, is there a sense that the entire community is now looking at that entire situation itself as something that we shouldn't have been there? The whole process was a war crime. The whole act of being there was a war crime. Like that's just some of the statements that I'm seeing. That's just what I'm seeing out there in the public. Like some of the commentary is that, the government itself is responsible as well. Like this is the level that it's gotten to, is what I'm saying in terms of how it's being portrayed now.
Well, look, the simple fact that the Morrison government and Morrison himself stood up and said brutal truths that hadn't even been proven beyond any level of probabilities, and allowed the Chief of Defence Force, not the minister, to stand up and deliver a speech where he said even without anyone being convicted, he was going to withdraw the awards from 3,500 Special Forces personnel. The simple fact that over our 20 years in Afghanistan, we rotated through 3-year election cycles with no solid and reviewed and accountable strategic plan at the political level, and relied on us on the ground to do what we needed to do to go and, as a Special Operations Task Group, kill over 10,000 insurgents. And I'm not just talking about Taliban. We were killing people who were coming from other countries to learn how to make IEDs. We were tracking and killing ISIS and Al-Qaeda and all sorts of people that we then went and fought in Iraq a couple of years later. And all of these stories, all of these handful of 35 or 39 alleged incidents that the Byrne report talks about, there are tens of thousands of missions that were conducted by our servicemen and women magnificently. I am still inspired by the level of heroism, selflessness, courage that I saw from my guys alone over there. And none of those stories are in the Australian public. So not only is the Defence Force not stepping up to at least be there to support their service personnel going through these proceedings, they are doing nothing to promote the positive actions that our servicemen and women conducted. There is a void over here of everything.
Why aren't they? Why aren't they?
Because they are cowards when it comes to moral courage back here at home. Because defence policy is at arm's length. Defence policy is to not get involved in these things. Avi, if we were in the US and I was on exchange to the US Special Ops for an entire year and did a number of deployments with them, US 4-star generals would be walking in and putting their stars on the table and stopping this shit from happening. Because too many of those within the higher ranks of our Defence Force are political appointees. We all know what the Chief of Defence Force has been up to. These people are those who have not seen combat themselves, who haven't had to be tested the way these soldiers under question have been tested, and have forgotten that their job is to serve and be responsible people, not for people, not to be entitled and served by others.
It's interesting because when I served in Israel, one of the things that they they prided themselves on was that every level higher than you, every commander beyond your rank had always seen more combat than you. And they made this point of when we were training, they go, they literally, I remember being in basic training, they go, the difference between us and Avi, you, the Australians, is that we lead from in front. The officer goes in front, not commanding from the back, we say, follow us and we'll take you. Yeah. And I feel like it's so true, it's sad that here, the people that are letting everybody take the hits are just are bureaucrats that have never seen a day. They're social justice warriors. The whole army here is becoming a social justice campaign.
It is, Harvey. And look, the best specific example, because I try and not be so anecdotal all the time, which it's easy for me to do, is at the moment you have General Campbell, the Chief of the Defence Force, who Malcolm Roberts has been doing a fantastic job grilling him in Senate estimates, where he received his Distinguished Service Cross for his command and leadership, quote, in action, while he was the commander of Joint Task Force 633 sitting back in Dubai. And I know that because Malcolm Roberts held up this lovely photo of when I was literally the personal security officer for Prime Minister Gillard when we came forward, and is sitting there behind the desk babysitting, providing security to them, and General Campbell sitting there in the front.
Were you protecting her? You were protecting Gillard?
I was Gillard's personal security officer, but at the table...
You were protecting her from misogyny, yeah?
Stop that. I'm not getting brought into this. I was actually very impressed with her over there.
I'm just mucking around. I had to lighten the room up. We're used to bantering on this show, and it's been real serious.
It's been pretty serious, yeah.
So 6 months later, my platoon deployed while Campbell was still over there as the commander. And at the end of that, during that rotation, my platoon, November platoon, conducted 67 missions outside the wire, killed 117 insurgents, captured many more, and lost Corporal Scott Smith, who was killed by an IED. And every single mission we went out on was with a minimum 30% partner force Afghan forces. I'll come back to that because the true testament is that not a single one of our partner force on any missions during the entire SOTG provided any incident reports or issues saying that they saw war crimes. Isn't that just an interesting fact that people back here are saying we did, but the Afghans we partnered with over there never said we did. But they've never been interviewed in anything. At the end of our rotation, I wrote up one of my sergeants for a Distinguished Service Medal and two of my other soldiers for commendations for Distinguished Service. So it goes a commendation for Distinguished Service, which is a ribbon, Distinguished Service Medal, Distinguished Service Cross. The sergeant I wrote up for a Distinguished Service medal had just performed magnificently and in combat, in fire, in action, all of it. And the other 2 soldiers, likewise, and over sustained periods leading multiple missions outside the wire, leading from the front. Not a single one of my soldiers received any distinguished service commendations or medals. I was told that the quota had been filled. And during that same rotation, at least 3 officers above my rank, so I was a captain, so a major, a lieutenant colonel, and a general, all received distinguished service crosses for their command and leadership in action. And that was one of the most shocking realizations for me, was that it was all the amazing actions of the guys on the ground allowing these generals to be fed these distinguished service crosses. And they are the people now sitting there across from senators in Senate estimates talking about these situations and the fog of war and war crimes without ever having been out there and facing the enemy on the ground to understand the context, but sit there and pretend like they do.
Who's going to want to serve now? That's what I want to know.
Yeah, what's the? I mean, as a young man, that's maybe
Hard
or a
times.
young woman thinking about joining the military.
Hard men. Easy times make easy men. We're in phases and stages, guys. We really are in phases and stages. And look, I say that because sitting right over here on my right shoulder are the medals and the picture of my grandfather who fought on the Hook in Korea and was the RSM, the Regimental Sergeant Major of the 8th Battalion in Vietnam. And he called me the week after the Brent report was released. Sorry, the week after the ABC actually launched an article accusing my platoon of being war criminals. He called me and just simply said this: don't let them do to your soldiers what they did to mine after Vietnam. And there are so many within the veteran community who talk to me and talk to my generation and just let us realize that this is phases and stages that they have been through.
Repeat itself.
And that's the saddest part, whether it's the fall of Saigon and then the fall of Afghanistan and what we're going through here and now, that we are so short-sighted as a nation that we have forgot where we have been and what we have done and how we've had to, like literally this year, Albo released a 50-year commemoration coin for the end of the Vietnam War, and we're right back here going through this bullshit.
I was going to say this. It's the same people in one breath that are saying, oh my God, I can't believe we did that to our Vietnam vets. That was horrible what they went through. And then the next breath, they're literally doing the exact same thing to our Afghan and Iraq vets. It's mind-boggling.
And they are the ones who can, all that they need to do, Arby, people in Parliament make legislation that brings in new laws. We recently raised a petition with over 13,000 signatures on the Parliament House website calling for any Special Forces soldiers or soldiers in general who have had any accusations arise from operations to be afforded protected identity status, because this is the situation. Afghanistan is under Taliban control. I'm being contacted by people in Afghanistan personally, and so are other soldiers. Like, there are legitimate fear of reprisals. And I spoke with a veteran today from Perth who was also in the police, and he served time undercover or working in some units. That means if ever there is any criminal case he has to attend to, he is afforded his identity to be withheld for fear of reprisal attacks. We haven't even put through legislation to appreciate that. And Albo and his team and government, who control the majority in the lower house, could literally put through legislation that says, in order to recognize and respect the unique nature of service for our veterans, any and all accusations or allegations of war crimes must meet the thresholds of evidence beyond reasonable doubt, overseen by the Office of the Special Investigator, whatever, before they're allowed to be published in the public arena. They could literally do that. But all these journalists will say, no, that's invasion of our freedom of speech, freedom of journalism. And that's, again, that question: what do you care more about? Your ability to throw stones at people without having to prove it beyond reasonable doubt, or actual justice?
Well, I mean, this particular defamation case, a lot of it's being discussed now in the role of the media in doing investigative journalism. And, they want to even, I think, loosen it up even more in terms of being able to do these type of investigations. So there is that balancing act, isn't there, between the media being able to do investigations? Because a part of me, I understand the importance of holding
sympathetic to it.
Holding authorities to account, investigating these things, having the power to call people out. There is a role for that, isn't there, in society? We're talking
about war. All of that, absolutely. But when it comes to war and conflict and war crimes. That has to be the only exception. And that all that we're saying is they can do that, but don't publish these people's names.
That's what I was just about to say. I think I don't think there's a question of whether
because
media should be able to investigate different allegations and even run with them, even if they're not completely, completely substantiated.
Yeah.
As long as they don't name individual people.
Exactly.
I feel like with Ben Roberts, from the beginning, this was tall poppy syndrome. They wanted to knock him down because he became the most decorated soldier. He was a symbol of an Australian hero. And you can see that in the post-reporting now. They were waiting, and they're all like, I reckon half these articles were written a year ago, just waiting to press play. That's what this was, to me, that's what this was about. And that's why I think he's right. I see both sides of it from a journalist's point of view. Absolutely. You cannot stop anyone from investigating and running stories.
Because there's plenty of countries that that do this kind of thing. They protect their armies.
But you shouldn't. Public interest should protect that. You should be able to run it, but without targeting specific people until they've been tried and tested in a criminal case.
So for me,
reasonable doubt.
It's not even. So, for instance, the ABZ made an accusation 3 years ago about my platoon. That's the first time a platoon of 40 has ever been named. For me, the legislation would state that they would simply mention them as a Australian Defence Force member or an Australian Defence Force unit. Like, it has to go to the department and be left at that departmental level. Then, therefore, the department has to deal with it. But when you start naming SAS, 2 Squadron, or Commandos, November Platoon, or then individuals, you're narrowing it down more and more and more. And I say this because it's how we actually go and target and find individuals. You start providing enough information, you start bracketing it to a group of people who, at least within the community, you start to know. So all we call for, Avi, would be that legislation that is not allowing it to be identified to individuals or units. It's with the Defence Force. And this is what the US and others do when they have those proceedings, to then go to that criminal trial.
Look, I think that's a reasonable position. I think it's reasonable as long as we can trust our governments and they're doing the right thing as well. I think that's where the conflict comes in.
I don't trust the government. I don't trust the government, and I would say I don't even care if it only has to go to a defamation style case, like a civil case, but that it has to be proven beyond reasonable doubt, as if it's criminal. You can't have these two. You can't have where it's the threshold is not as high, so any journalist can run a story based on the word of some Afghani that's been paid to come here, and potentially some pissed off or jealous comrade. Like, it's got to be properly substantiated beyond reasonable doubt to be able to drag someone's name through the mud like that. They're loving it. Like, they're literally, every headline is war criminal. You've gone from being a hero to a war criminal, and you've never been charged, or you've never been proven beyond reasonable doubt. To me, that is insanity. And you wouldn't see that in Israel. You wouldn't see that. The whole country would get behind it. That's a difference between.
You wouldn't see it in the US. You would not see it in the US. I'll tell you that much.
But in the US, I feel like you'd still have the outrage mob, the left, the Twitter alley, everybody campaigning to crucify the war hero because there's kind of a political divide. The one thing that I've always seen in Israel, and I've always wished I'd see back here in Australia, is this almost the complete country. There's always the extreme elements, but almost the whole country gets behind their heroes because, look,
it's survival, mate.
It's survival, exactly. When you're survival, but the thing is, it's our survival here as well, but they don't realize it.
We haven't had
if not for these people that are willing to stand up and fight for us, then one day you just won't those freedoms that the generations before us have fought, died, and bled for. We won't have that in the future. And what do you think is going to happen then? You think they're just going to leave us alone?
No, and that's the issue. I mean, I say the US because the US was touched by things like Pearl Harbor and the Twin Towers, and Israel's the diamond formed under pressure as far as literally having to fight and innovate for your survival, and you have people, you know, that the national conscription, or the national service, that's, you know, people happily do that because they understand where it needs to be. In Australia, mate, we had the bombing of Darwin in World War II, and we had a submarine come into the harbour in Sydney. You know, we live on a bubble down here that we readily, definitely take for granted. And, you know, younger generations in particular have never had to see that full relevance of our military forces in action because, again, we failed as a nation, we failed as a media, we failed as a government to educate Australia on what our servicemen and women have been doing outside of the stories of when soldiers won Victoria Crosses and now the stories of war crimes allegations. And that's the most miserable part, is that our entire service and deployments to Afghanistan are being summarized so readily by, like you said, mate, those in the media who have been drafting these articles for months, if not years, waiting for this.
What if Ben Roberts? What would you say to him now?
It's an
All
interesting.
those like him.
What do you mean?
I don't know. I guess this opens Pandora's box. Now everyone's fair game, and I don't think anybody's. The media can run any story on anyone that served in that period,
Yeah.
and if they don't dare, like you're not going to want to fight it.
Yeah.
You're just going to have to cop it. What would you say to him now? Everything he's been through.
Oh, this is the whole thing. Like, deep down, I actually hope that he gets the chance to defend himself in a court where the requirement is beyond reasonable doubt. Like, I literally, as a strategy here, I literally just want to see all of this pile-on of headlines then all of a sudden have to be tested to that true measure of what it should be afforded. I'm deeply sorry that, like, our nation literally has shown such disrespect to all servicemen and women by not getting up there and being willing to defend that, by allowing, you know, it's the easy abdication. Oh, it's before the courts. Yeah, it's before civil courts. Like, and it shouldn't even be there. You know, I'm so disappointed by those in government who aren't seeing what is going on and going, whoa, you know, we're still learning as a country. It's time for new legislation. They're just sitting back and being silent.
I almost feel like he should be coming out, and like it's probably the high. He would be the most lonely space in the world now. He was flying high. He had a decent life before, but I dare say,
I mean,
that's
it's two extremes. If we're talking about a story from like hero to villain, all by the media, pretty much.
All of it.
All of it.
They created it and they finished it. But I feel like the one thing he should be fighting for now is come out and go, charge me. Charge me. I want to be able to prove beyond reasonable doubt that I was innocent.
Isn't it? That's literally the only recourse he has. And that is reliant on there being a case that meets that threshold against him. And if there literally isn't a case that is able to meet the threshold to lay a charge, then he is permanently stuck in this place of, well, there was never a case that met the threshold to charge me, but you're still allowed to call me a war criminal because the civil courts allow it. Like, that is just mind-blowing, isn't it? Oh, I've lost you. No comms. I can't hear you.
Can't hear us.
There you go. Now.
There we go.
Sorry, guys.
I
Lots
think
of technical issues today. If you see me looking down at the screen, it's because I'm working on the technical stuff.
Isn't it?
I know. Should be simple.
Rukshan promised me when we started this podcast that he's Indian and that that it comes to him first.
I'm on the phone to tech support as we speak.
I am not entering into any of these conversations.
Me neither. But where were we? I lost my train of thought. But I feel like I don't even know where.
No, it's just a very complex issue. Like, I get it from all the different perspectives, but it's just so complex now.
That's what I was saying. Is that essentially it's a target on his back. He can't go to half the Middle East now. He'd be known as the war criminal that targeted a Muslim in a, like, it's that type of stuff is dangerous. And if he was innocent, what does it mean?
Yeah, regardless, mate. And this is what I've been saying. And this is where, when I first decided to speak up about the accusations against me and my platoon, it was a very real conversation I had to have with my family, because you don't need to be charged or even identified as, you know, a war criminal. It's just being identified as someone who fought in Afghanistan. Like our entire career, we're afforded protected identity status. And unless I tell someone, or unless the media exposes it, then I could actually live safely at a time when, again, the Taliban is in control of Afghanistan, and there are terrorist organizations around the world who would love to find people who are a part of those operations. Like, these are the real world threats. And that's the most disgusting part for me, is with all of those considerations, our government still does not put in legislation that requires anything to protect identities until it's proven guilty, or at least required to be proven guilty beyond reasonable doubt. Like, that's the most disrespectful to me as a veteran in the veteran community, is that the government is not responding to realize all of these risk factors, and instead is too afraid to take on the media. And that is the balls of it. The government is too afraid to take on the media in this country.
And was there any comments that were?
Oh, there's been a lot of comments, but due to the technical issues, I don't think we'll be able to.
Oh, you can't get them on screen.
No, I can't get them on screen, but it's just been like
It's
whirlwind trying to fix the audio.
Can you read something out?
Is there no? There was no decent one that I think.
That I'll have a look through now while you guys keep having a chat.
You look. He doesn't. I never should have got into this opposition podcast.
Watch you guys via social media. It seems like such a well-oiled machine. And now that we're sort of behind the curtain,
he's cooked. He doesn't know what he's doing.
Waiting for someone to run in and try and hit you with a chair or a pole, aren't we?
He's Rukshan. He runs a wild shop here.
Well, this is a good comment. I'll pull this on screen.
Running Rukshan, is that an expression?
What is that?
You know, like, what is it? Running rough. What is it like when you're, I don't know, running Rukshan? What's it called when you?
Rukshan doesn't run, I can guarantee.
Well, we got a comment here from Windy. I'll read that out. Windy wrote, "I'm ashamed how the Australian media has singled out and vilified one person. It's a complex situation, and it has major injustice to this hero who has been scapegoated. A sad day for those who fought in a long, drawn-out war that was never meant to drag on for so long." And I guess a lot of people probably forget like how long that actual.
How long was Afghanistan?
Yeah,
it was
20 years.
20 years. 20 years. There would have been people born.
Australians.
What did you say?
26,000 Australians deployed.
26,000 Australians. But that means there would have been Aussies born who then served.
Yep.
18, 19-year-olds, 20-year-olds would have served.
Yep, absolutely.
And how many men and women did we lose in that war, Heston, during that time?
41. 41 died in combat or during the operations. And since we deployed to Afghanistan first in 2001, over 1,600 veterans have taken their own lives outside of that. Wow. And that's why we have a Royal Commission.
Would you say 1,600?
1,600 veterans have taken their own lives.
How many of those, what proportion of those were Afghan veterans, do you know?
Good question. I don't have that data.
No.
Yeah.
It's insane, though. It's insane. Our country does not give a shit about.
Would this whole situation also be taking a toll on people in this sense as well?
Massively.
Mental health.
That's been the response from so much of the community. Like I said, guys have literally been taken down their identifying factors of being SAS or Special Forces. Guys have literally gone to dark places and called. I run a charity, Veteran Support Force. We've had calls, we've had emails. Other veteran organizations are doing, welfare check-ins, proactive check-ins, asking veterans to do buddy checks. Like it takes situations like these just can sometimes be the final straw for some people in a place where they're already feeling disrespected, moral injury, all these sorts of things that the Royal Commission is bringing out. And one thing I really want to quickly touch on is that the biggest, most disappointing, most disgusting element alongside all of this is, I was an officer. I was specially selected, specially trained, and then being a Special Forces officer. And the principles of being an officer is you're responsible for your soldiers, regardless of whether they stuff up or regardless of whether it's victory or anything else in between. And the whole thing is through just simply what is the requirement of being an officer. The Defence Force and the chiefs and all of that should be there standing by Ben Roberts-Smith throughout this entire situation until he is proven guilty in a court of law. Like the response, the automatic response from every general and person wearing a medal and every warrant officer and every sergeant major should be standing by every soldier because they're afforded the presumption of innocence and because it is our responsibility, because we understand the unique nature of service and combat operations, until they are found guilty. And when they are found guilty, then they must be accountable, and we will be a part of that accountability if we have anything to bear as well. But if they are not found guilty, then we are with them, we are supporting them the entire time, because that is our job. This guy is out there by himself, and the Defence Force and the ministers and everything else are remaining silent.
100%. And I'm looking on Twitter and all these,
Well, I'll bring up this comment. I mean, this is a good one.
Yeah.
These armchair critics who have never experienced conflict need to go over and show our special forces how to do war with diversity and inclusion. I mean, that's just one type of message, but there is a lot of I've seen a lot of armchair experts on war and discussing this topic. Like I refrain from discussing this topic because I've never been in that situation, and I don't understand it from that perspective, right? But there is a lot of people who are commentating on this at the moment, like as if they were there or as if they witnessed the incidents. Yeah. And that is not from from being a.
You sent me that screenshot where they were mocking me and they think like I've lost, like I should take the L because I stand by him because I stood by him previously until, as Heston says, unless you actually find him guilty beyond reasonable doubt. They think now I should take the L. He is a war criminal.
Yeah.
Like they say, this aged well. Like, mate, I still stand by him.
Yeah.
Prove it. Prove that he actually did commit war crimes. I won't stand by a war criminal.
Yep.
But I've watched everything they put out, and they put the best out. We saw last night how the mainstream media it was Channel 10 last night, today's Channel 9, but how they love, I would love to watch all the, they played his private phone calls that they obviously, for people who don't understand media, they obviously set it up because why would they have the recordings of his phone calls to his brothers in arms? So this has been a campaign of theirs, the media's campaign, for a very long time. So they've set it up. They had they were rolling that tape for a while. And
right.
I would love to see everything else they captured that didn't suit their little narrative, like we saw last night with Lisa Wilkinson, and like that's just how they operate. And we're seeing one side, a narrative that has the powers of an entire news network, a powerful news network. And that's what I loved when we were watching the Channel 9 one, and they were acting like they're the biggest victim. They were acting like it's David versus Goliath, like they're David.
I don't think it's necessarily like that.
But that's the way they portrayed it in their film. I don't know if you watched it, Heston, the Channel 9
60 minutes.
60
if
minutes.
Anyone missed it, yeah.
The 60 minutes episode. They acted like it was David versus Goliath. Ben Roberts was Goliath because he was backed up by Channel 7. And it's like, dude, you're Channel 9. You're not the little dude here. You're not.
They've had that ready for how long?
Oh, you see.
Well, we were saying that they must have been working on this for a while.
Well, it was well produced. It was well produced. I've got to give them that. It was well produced, but they've been working on it for ages. He's standing there on a roof in Afghanistan doing his little piece to camera. Like, this is so. It's an act to show.
Right. It's about being right in the public opinion, not doing the right thing, and that's the saddest part for me. Very quickly,
sacrificing our heroes for that. That's the problem for me. You're sacrificing those who sacrificed everything. And unless you 100% can prove it beyond reasonable doubt, then shut up.
That's it. And the process in between, mate. If I had a soldier who committed a DUI during my time in the army, you were at court with that soldier the whole time. And if they were found guilty or not guilty, if there was ever a court appearance, if one of your soldiers ever had to go to court, as the immediate supervising officer, you always had to go into court with them and dress in your suit, and did that. And I did a few, mainly for DUIs or things like that. I look at that, and then I look at what's going on at the moment, and I'm like, where's the Defence Force?
Yeah.
What is the point where we choose to abandon our soldiers before they're proven beyond reasonable doubt, or at least to be there with them because they chose to serve and support our nation, and that's our command responsibility, because that's what leadership is.
I just don't know why the hell anyone would want to join the armed forces now.
It's setting a very dangerous precedent because, like, if you're not willing to support them, at least with the presumption of innocence, like if we as military members are not showing that support for the presumption of innocence, then we leave the door wide open for everyone else to pile on and find their cracks and wedges to exploit. That's where, as an organization, we have the strength to be able to stand up and support our personnel the way we support them while we're overseas. And I say this, mate, when I was in Afghanistan and something happened, I knew that I could call in the Quick Reaction Force. I could call in the Finger of God. I could put a call in that would get back to the minister back in Australia faster than, you could put your popcorn on in the microwave. Here and now, when we're under the biggest attack you've ever seen by people who, and I'll say attack because, like, you have those articles calling on the destruction of the entire Anzac myth. There is not even no support. There's nothing.
Where's all those people that every year on Anzac Day, head down to the shrine for their photo, or all the ministers that go for their photo ops? Where are they all? Where are they all when that entire community is under attack? When these articles are being published because one war hero has lost a defamation case against the media. Where are they?
Well, this is where, and I've been saving this one up. I'm going to give it to you guys though. At those occasions, Army, at Anzac Day and Remembrance Day, and every day at every RSL across the country, they play the ode. And the ode starts with, "They shall grow not old as we the left that grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn." Nor the years condemn. And everyone at the end of that says, we will remember them lest we forget. And we are letting the years condemn, more than 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15 years ago are when some of the accusations of these alleged war crimes come out. And we have allowed not the years to condemn, but Australian journalists to condemn the actions of our soldiers, of our Victoria Cross winners, to literally condemn them as war criminals, even though they have not been charged or found guilty of being war criminals. So when those politicians and those bureaucrats and whoever else comes down to lay their wreath and they recite that ode, we need to make sure that when they say, "Nor the years condemn," they look in the mirror to make sure that they're backing up those words with actions, because right now, none of them are.
Are you still friends with Jackie Lambie?
Friends?
I don't know. You had some sort of like, I remember back when, during the Royal Commission, the days calling for a Royal Commission, I saw you were at a lot of events. I thought you guys were almost working together there. Maybe I'm calling it wrong. But has she said anything about any of this? I haven't even watched. I think I got a bit tired of her over the COVID period, but
yeah, I haven't heard much.
Because she's generally been good on this one issue.
She's been great with the Brereton Report stuff. She's been great with holding Campbell to task. I, to be honest, mate, haven't actually looked at a lot of what's been coming from Canberra over this outside of what I've seen on social media. I mean, to be honest, myself and many other veterans have just been tuning out at the moment because it's toxic to open your phone up and have a look at this stuff. Jackie and others will be some of those people that we go to as we look to draft legislation to bring in these protections, like we sort of spoke about beforehand. She herself has served, and Jackie and I worked very closely together on the Royal Commission. And
that's what I meant. You looked at me funny when I said I didn't know how to.
Friends.
Frame it.
One thing I've learned over the last 3 years, Arby, is you don't have friends in politics.
I thought we were.
As soon as the agendas sway, for instance, I am literally embroiled in my own case against the ABC. And
I thought we weren't allowed to talk about it.
I've asked for a support and action, and then I see people having regular slots on Q&A and other things, and all of a sudden not answering my calls of support. So it's all a very controlled system, in my opinion.
Yeah, I read between the lines there. But having said, talking about we'll be super careful because obviously your case is before the courts at the moment. But correct me if I'm wrong. Can we pull that article up?
Yeah, I'll pull it up.
Here we go. ABC to use public interest test against defamation case brought by former soldier Heston Russell. Good looking lad. No, it's the ABC's fake news. So obviously they're going to have a good photo of you. They can't put anything real. No, but they're going to test the public interest defense, right?
Yep.
This, correct me if I'm wrong, they dropped their truth defenses, which is what with
They had it struck out. Yep.
They had it struck out. So that means, so with Ben Roberts, it was the truth defense that they got him on with, again, in civil. So the threshold is much lower than criminal. That's what we've been talking about this whole episode. In your case, they're not even using truth they cannot use truth as a defense.
This is true.
So the media, so the ABC, the public broadcaster, we're not going to go on it long. I know when's it in court next?
28th of July is when the trial starts.
28th of July. The ABC, the taxpayer funded, so we're actually paying to fight you. Any taxpayer is paying for this fight. They're paying to defend whatever it is that you're claiming is defamation, because they're saying they're not even arguing it's true now. They're arguing it's in the public interest, even if it's not true.
Yeah, this is the first time public interest
Shivers down my spine.
First time public interest will ever be tested. What I will say, Avi, is anyone who wants to get the full piece, go to hestonrussell.com/ABC. I've been maintaining a blog over the last 3 years that has even now all the court documents and everything. So as opposed to me,
so they can read it themselves.
They can read it, see the headlines, everything. It's. I cannot wait for this trial to finally begin.
Mad.
Let's have a chat afterwards.
We'll do 100%.
Really interesting, yeah.
Any other good comments before we?
There's heaps of comments. I just can't keep up with it.
I said good comments.
There's lots of comments. Some of them I can't publish. Yeah.
Imagine. People are pretty.
Are they about Heston?
They're mostly about you.
About what did I do? They always pick on me, Heston.
I feel like you enjoy it, Avi.
I do.
I got a good one here. ABC is woke. I mean, I agree with that.
Did you literally?
I get me in trouble.
Is there anything to the point?
I mean, someone wrote. I won't put the comment up because there's a bit of foul language in there. But they said before any digger is held accountable, the government, top brass, and media, and everyone pushing a lot of these wars should be held accountable. I think that's one thing.
It's a good point. It's like if you're gonna,
it's the soldiers that go into the war, and it's the ones that face the consequences, the repercussions at the end stage of it.
They put their life at risk, and
put their life at risk, and when they're back here,
they're held
even
accountable.
a few years later, when we're looking back at those wars and trying to find out how those things came about, we also again blame the soldiers.
Well,
we forget about the people that sent them there in the first place.
Yeah.
This context, we're in 2023, making statements on the ethical conduct of people in combat over a decade ago. And again, as I said to you beforehand, we never went outside the wire without our Afghan partner force, and none of them been interviewed as a part of this. And it's in the context of the time where every single person who comes from Afghanistan or provides evidence from Afghanistan has so much to gain from casting any accusations or aspersions against our people, because the Taliban controls Afghanistan and the government is paying reparations or said they're going to pay reparations. It's such a mess outside of everything else. Can we just appreciate how much of a mess it is and say, right, no more? It has to be a court. A criminal court where it requires beyond reasonable doubt. That's it.
And you're happy for that. You're happy.
Really bring it on.
If somebody's guilty, they're guilty. Hold them accountable.
Absolutely. You know what? And this is what I even said, and I've said this beforehand. If there is someone in my platoon who is found to be guilty of something beyond reasonable doubt in a criminal court, I, as the officer, have accountability with that as well. And that is what we are taught.
How long did you spend in Afghanistan, did you say?
I went there 4 times. That one deployment we talk about was 5 months. I spent close to a year in Afghanistan in total over different periods.
In that time that you were there, did you witness anything that would constitute a war crime?
No, mate. And this is the crazy part. We had to pull back our partner force at certain parts because, they were they were defending within their own country. Absolutely not. And that's where, just on the balance of probabilities, for people to say, this is when all these journalists tell me there's war crimes. I'm like, look, mate, I was there on 4 separate occasions. Tell me what war crimes you saw, because I didn't.
Yeah.
And on the balance of probabilities, there's some issue with the story I'm being told.
Don't worry, I get that. I get every I've lived my life hearing from every expert on the Israel-Palestine conflict, and when they talk about Gaza, oh no, but I'm like, mate, I spent my whole service in Gaza. I was deployed in Gaza for about a year and a half. Like, mate, what you're talking about is complete nonsense. That stuff can't happen, and if it does happen, they're held accountable. If somebody actually crosses the line, they're held accountable. The difference is there. The entire country will back them until somebody does something that's to be condemned, and then everybody does condemn.
Yeah,
but you won't see this trial by media like this, and then defending themselves in a defamation case to try clear their name, and then losing the defamation case, making everything 10 times worse. Like, why would Ben Roberts? Why would he take the defamation case if he didn't believe that there's no way he's going to be he's going to be found innocent? Like, you just wouldn't do it if you thought there was any risk in that.
Well, some people are saying he probably never thought that his own would turn on him.
Probably.
Yeah.
I mean, isn't that what gives the most weight to all of this? Is the fact
sure.
that I
don't think I think the Afghans on their own probably don't hold much weight, because even watching their interviews that Channel 9 cut up very nicely and produced, it's not that compelling, because it feels like it was all they fed them the lines, whereas
all I want to
see,
I just want to see this tested where no one is granted any immunity and just the truth has to be told. Like, that's all that I'd like to see.
So the immunity, how does that work? So you were saying before, the immunity is essentially that if they were willing to testify in this civil case for the media,
then it couldn't be used in any subsequent.
It can't be used in any subsequent. So is that their
subsequent trial against them?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
But what about? But if an investigation pulls them in, not via that case, do they still have immunity? They can't. Who's given them the immunity?
This is where I'm not a legal professional, but for instance, under our constitution,
we need Justin Quill.
Yeah, under our constitution, you are entitled to remain silent, and in order for them under subpoena to testify and provide their evidence, they were offered and afforded and given what I understand certificates. Federal court judges given them certificates, which means that whatever they have said cannot be then used against them in separate proceedings. I don't understand the full nuances of it.
Yeah.
But, it's just, I just really personally struggle to understand that whole situation and circumstance. And that's where, again, the uniqueness of this civil proceeding, I think I need that criminal beyond reasonable doubt context instead.
But I think in criminal that also offer deals of immunity as well.
So
it's not necessarily the saving factor. I think the beyond reasonable doubt is probably more important than whether there is immunity offered. I think though, if we're being honest, the public deserves to know that in this case, who was offered what for their testimony, who was paid what, who was whatever anyone received, should be in such a matter that is of public interest. Taking down one of our heroes, I think that should all be.
I don't think there's any such requirement, though.
No, but I just.
You're saying.
I'm saying it should be. This all is a part.
Transparency and accountability is.
You're talking about the media that's saying that they're doing this all for transparency and for justice.
Yep.
Like, come on, show us everything, not your packaged little hour, 60-minute segment where you've thrown some music behind an Afghani telling like this story that if it was true is really, really sad. But like, I'm not sold by that.
Yeah, it's an interesting situation. I just don't think it's been handled in a way that demonstrates the respect that should be shown to those who have gone and done that stuff.
There we go.
Yeah.
No more comments?
No. I mean, there's lots of comments, but like I said, technical issues.
I think we're going to fire Rukshan. All right,
next one we do, I'll fix the comment situation.
We'll have to have Heston back one time.
Definitely we will.
Give us a few months. We'll see it happen.
Heston, for people that do want to follow what you're doing and where can they find you?
Instagram's my primary one, Heston Russell. But again, please, if you want to follow along, my website, just hestonrussell.com. On the ABC stuff, hestonrussell.com/ABC. I tend to stay off Twitter. It's pretty toxic, but
No, it's pretty good these days.
Oh, yeah?
Elon Musk has half saved it. When was the last time you were on Twitter?
How's this person? Who are you people?
What's he doing?
Oh, anyway. I actually just found out some of these comments.
Are you seeing
What
the
is-
comments yet?
Where's he seeing the comments?
I think he's seeing it just on the page.
Heston Russell, the gay conservative. Who are these people? Come on,
I didn't
people,
want to
just-
put that stuff up.
Just focus on the facts. This is what I hate about this stuff. You know? Anyway.
I'll let Rukshan read the comments. So Instagram. So you're not coming on Twitter. You've decided.
I am on Twitter. Heston Russell on Twitter. Get on there and show me some love. Help fight back against all the bots that seem to target me on Twitter. Twitter's a place like literally.
When did you stop using Twitter though?
No, I'm still on it. I just try and avoid it. Like if I open up Twitter, like especially after this,
guys,
especially after this Ben Roberts-Smith case, I have had so many people. So the Guardian literally published an article that says failed Senate candidate Heston Russell allegedly shot at unarmed civilians from a helicopter, and that is still up on the Guardian's piece because the ABC, in filing their defence, filed a brand new accusation saying that I did that. And the ABC has since withdrawn that truth defense, but that article is still up on The Guardian. And people on Twitter post the Ben Roberts-Smith stuff when I literally posted my video about the difference between the balance of probabilities and unreasonable doubt. They're grabbing that Guardian thing and reposting. And people are on Twitter calling me a war criminal. It's great. It's going straight in the defamation case. People like keep going.
But you need to show damages. That's
Like,
one of the, these people don't get that. That's like one of the hardest parts. You need to actually show the damages. They just kid.
They'll see that they have a different opinion to you. They'll quickly Google your name and they'll grab the first thing they find that is negative towards you, and they'll use it. Like, of course you would say that, this, that, and the other. They have no context. And I've literally gone for the last 3 years and spelled it out in a whole blog for these people at hestonrussell.com.
They don't care about the truth.
They don't care. They care about winning the argument. And it's the same as these journalists, mate. They care about winning the argument. They do not care about real justice.
Tearing down everything Australian. That's the thing. These people hate our country. They hate everything we stand for. And the saddest thing is that it was heroes like you and Ben Roberts that they should be thanking for the freedoms that they have to be even able to shit on you.
And Avi, this is the whole thing. Like, you'll never find us. I'm not a hero. You'll never find us calling ourselves heroes. We did our job and we loved it, and we did it because we believed in what we were doing. We don't want people to bow down and give us respect. We want people to allow us to live our lives to the same standards of laws in this country that at least shows some recognition for how unique the combats and the wars this country sent us to do, and not treat us just like people off the street who you're allowed to accuse of being war criminals. Like, it's so, we don't want anything other than, that little bit of satisfaction to be allowed to live our lives and be afforded due process and the presumption of innocence, because what we did and what we faced over there was so unique. For people to sit here today, for journalists to sit here today and think that they know combat because they were over there protected by our former guys conducting interviews is just so pathetic. And I can't believe how these people are happy for that to be the standard that they truly believe is enough for them to be proven right.
I understand you don't see yourselves as heroes, but I guess as an Australian that enjoys the freedoms that I get to enjoy here, I thank you. I thank the Ben Roberts. I thank every single man and woman that has fought and served for this country, bled, and those that have died. We wouldn't be here today in Rukshan's shonky studio if not for all of you. Yeah. So I say thank you on that note.
I'd ask your viewers, Avi, to do the same thing at the moment. There are literally veterans and their families out there at the moment who are affected by this, because there is so much going on in their lives already. And all that I would simply ask any of your viewers to do is to find or reach out to the veteran and just say thank you for your service. We can see what's going on, and we just want you to know that we are here and we support you, and that we believe in the things you fought for. Like, that is one message that needs to get out a lot more, because a lot of lads and ladies are struggling with the wave of attacks that are coming from this.
Unbelievable. There we
So,
go.
should we take some questions?
Did you have some questions before we
can
go?
try a question round. We'll try just 2 minutes. If anyone has any questions, just put Q in front of whatever you want to ask, and then write the question, and then we'll try to answer some of the questions.
Q.
I did see someone asked about the. I'm not sure if we covered this, but about the VC medal. There's some questions about that, because there is a bit of speculation and discussion.
The Victoria Cross was awarded for
yeah.
an act of valor.
Yeah.
And extreme
what was
valor.
the act he got it for?
2010. Long story short, basically landing into TZAC. It was the. What do we call it? It was the contact. It was the action through which the battle honour Shawali Kot was actually awarded to the Special Operations Task Group, both commandos and SAS, during the. It was a mission in TZAC where they basically landed and got straight into contact, and Ben fought forward and destroyed a machine gun position, grenaded it, shot another guy in the face, and basically, saved the lives of members of his patrol, and his gallantry his valor was of the highest order. And none of that's been called into question. And this is the difference between, like, Campbell, Chief of Defence Force, has a Distinguished Service Cross for his whole, command and leadership in action. Victoria Cross is awarded for a specific act of valor. And that has never been called into question. So there is no grounds for his Victoria Cross to be called into question. You don't get a Victoria Cross for being a good guy or for having a good career.
For a specific act.
For a specific thing. And same as his Medal of Gallantry. His Medal of Gallantry, I believe, was in 2006. Separate occasion, I think it was part of a sniper pair or a sniper team where he held off, faced 16 insurgents and held them off for 45 minutes so his team could reposture and do what they needed to do. And again, that was never called into question. So these individual occurrences of valor and bravery stand testament alone and are getting dragged into this.
And what's the politics between the SAS and the commandos? I know in Israel, like all the politics between different units. What's the dynamic there? Who thinks they're better than what?
Well,
Who
this
is
is
better.
So this is it. Like, this was, you're talking about 2006, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. We're in 2023. For me to even comment on that, having gotten out of the army in 2019, is like so inappropriate.
What do you mean? You can't talk about what the dynamic or in the armed forces is between, like.
I can talk about what it was back then. I can talk about.
I don't mean I mean the. I don't know how. I'm probably not articulating it right. Like, in my unit in the army, what is that?
The roles, the different roles.
No. There's almost like a banter, right, between our opposing. Are you guys rivals? Are the SAS and the commandos considered rivals in that kind of military?
Yeah, it's definitely a much larger conversation. So, the SAS has its lineage back, and particularly, you've got the Vietnam and you've got the Z Special Forces and the commandos. Commandos are more of a raiding, direct action force. SAS was traditionally a special reconnaissance force, but Afghanistan, we came together with roles that really overlapped, and there definitely was a rivalry, particularly when we deploy over there and we have to use helicopters from the US, drones from the US and Brits, and I had French Harriers flying. We deployed over there and we had to compete against everyone, including each other, for assets to be able to go out and do our missions, and a large rivalry came from that. But since then, like back in Australia, our roles are so very separate. For starters, SAS is over in Perth, commandos, 2 commandos down in Holsworthy in Sydney, and we have such clear and distinct roles. And for instance, Afghanistan was only one part of the 4 different capabilities we did in the commandos, from domestic counterterrorism to operations in the Asia Pacific to training and refit to fight sort of stuff. And SAS did clandestine operations, but other special recovery operations, their own counterterrorism operations as well. Very, very distinct. But again, mate, I've done that many interviews and they still call me SAS Officer Heston Russell. Most of the media still doesn't even know the difference between the two.
All right, I've got a question here.
Send it.
Just give me this one. It's a pretty good question.
Can you read it?
Can I read?
I need help.
Give me 1 second. All right, we got it from Test Press here. What advice would you give to someone who is about to transition from military life to civilian life?
Great question. Reach out and connect with a veteran who's recently done that themselves. If you want to contact us at vsf.org.au, that's my charity. There's so many organizations set up to specifically support veterans in that transition piece. And it's so important you do that, because you're going to transition from a culture and a community that has indoctrinated you to put purpose and the team before yourself, to have the values of selflessness, responsibility, and moral and physical courage, to a society or a system that largely prioritizes individuals over others, trades selflessness for selfishness, trades responsibility for an entitlement. And so many veterans go through this sort of dislocation of their morals and values, and takes a long time for them to bounce back and appreciate you can't derive the same level of purpose working for profit that you did working for purpose and working for people in the Defence Force. So I'd really just advise to maintain a community first and foremost to help you find your footing, reach out and connect with veterans, connect with a veteran organisation, and go through and have some people with you during that process that takes some time.
Oh, I've got another question here. This is more related to the case, but someone wrote, how do you actually, was the farmer actually Taliban? And I think just to expand on that, when you're in the theater of war, can you tell, is it easy to
The fog of war.
the fog of war, you know, is it so clear, like in terms of these differences where people are hiding and, you know, obviously trying to blend in, and trying to get away from some of these situations, some of these terrorists?
It's so hard to answer those questions like so linearly. Like for starters, I don't know who the farmer was, like, and I can't comment on that other than there. But yeah, there are situations where you literally just landed. I remember you land and you just get shot at from all over the place. Then all of a sudden you get to the place where you're being shot at, and there's not a weapon in sight. There's not even a brass casing in sight. And there's these guys who were like, I'm farmers, I'm Afghani. And then our partner force would come in and they're like, this guy's, the clothing he's wearing is, you know, above the knee, not below the knee, which means he's from Pakistan. He's not from this village. And then he'd go and dig up this, and there's this weapon. And then we'd run our explosive detection sort of stuff over their hands. And this guy's been firing a weapon. And, you know, we had sophisticated measures to sort of do that stuff. But, you know, if you just, with the Mark 1 eyeball turning up and seeing this, you're like, you guys have done this before.
because from a lot of the reporting, you get this impression that, you know, you kind of can tell straight away who's a farmer, who's a soldier. Like, I mean, that's the impression you're getting. Like, everyone's like a farmer.
Vietnam, Viet Cong, you know, Afghanistan, Taliban insurgents, blending in and blending out and harnessing the human terrain is literally their weapon against us.
Exactly. You know, when I served in Gaza, I remember one time specifically, we were patrolling the fence to like the border, and there's a 200-meter exclusion zone where they're not allowed within 200 meters towards the Israel border. And then there was like a dad with his two kids walking to the border, you know, waving a white, you know, cloth, and he's being shot at from behind from Hamas. And coming to, and as a soldier, we're receiving him, but in your mind you're like, is this a setup? Is he strapped? Like, is he gonna blow when he gets here? And you don't know till it happens, and somebody kind of makes the call. Nah, we're good. We'll go with this, or let's not. You know what I mean? And it's just like, to be able to sit here in Australia now, it's not even the fog of war. It's the reality of life there. You just can't. Their entire life is the ones that are insurgents that are trying to. They know the lifestyle. Like he said, they know the difference between one with their pants slightly beyond what did you say, the ankle, and one below the ankle. And it's little things like that you just wouldn't know unless you're a native, or unless you've been there for years. And they practice trying to emulate and to be the most harmless thing, to be able to perpetrate those crimes. So you'd be just being there working, you'd be on edge no matter whether you're in combat right now in this moment or not. You'd be ready for it at any time.
That's it. And particularly, mate, we had IEDs. Like, I lost one of my guys to an IED. Like, the enemy didn't even need to be around, and they would draw you into areas. I love some of these comments. This guy, Obi, the guy is smiling while recounting his war experience. It's disturbing. What would you like me to do? Cry, mate? Like, Honestly, these people need to understand this stuff. And
Mm.
also, if someone showed up in your neighborhood, this is also this other part, this stigma of this belief that people think we just, we didn't walk around just
Well, yeah.
looking.
On
We
that, there was a question. Do you think Australia should have been in Afghanistan in principle? I think that's kind of leading into what you're talking about.
That's completely separate. Like
Okay.
politicians decide where our military goes. Our military doesn't decide.
Mm.
And to ask a soldier or an officer, like, should we be in Afghanistan? We can pontificate about that. But again, I had no part in that decision making. My job is to do my job with my team for my nation. And I believed 100% in what we did over there, because there were evil people we removed from the world who were trying to hurt people, killing women and children, blowing them up in marketplaces, through to trying to bring those capabilities back to target other Western nations. Absolutely. But, in the special operations, we never launched on a mission unless we had at least 3 layers of different intelligence. We went hunting bad people. We didn't just walk around playing tiddlywinks and decide to turn up in someone's neighborhood. It's again, I'm very disappointed in seeing some of these comments in here, because it's talking about what we said before, guys. The armchairs and the keyboard warriors who sit back and pontificate on what war is like, as opposed to try and take themselves out of their own agenda or stigma or whatever and think, what would that actually be like? Or how about I actually go and chat to a veteran who's been there, to listen to understand, not listen to react.
But to be clear, you can be against the war in general and still support every single serviceman and woman that fought there.
Mm.
And I almost see myself as something like that, because I look at a lot of these wars that happen and I think that was a waste of human life, and that was a waste of Australia. That 41 Aussies died in that, and how many more have been maimed, badly injured?
Mm.
Like so I would look at it and go, in hindsight, we did 20 years, and what did we get? The Taliban's still in charge. So what did we get? Absolutely nothing. But I back up every single one of those war heroes that served.
And Avi, I'm dead set against war as well. But you know what? We need better politicians so we don't have to fight wars, because wars happen when diplomacy fails.
Mm.
Till we start selecting better politicians who are able to
fighting a lot more wars and
conduct international affairs and policy better, that's where wars come from. You're 100% correct, mate. Afghanistan, have a look at it at the moment, the Taliban's back in control.
What was the point?
All the rest in between. And that's where I just focus on, the practical, tactical, and operational outcomes we achieved. Like I said, mate, 2016, I was in Iraq with the Special Operations Joint Task Force fighting against ISIS, ISIL, Daesh. And a lot of the preparatory work we'd done in Afghanistan really helped us to do that. But who here has heard about the 5 years worth of Special Operations Task Forces deployed to Iraq after Afghanistan fighting Daesh?
Mm.
Like, this is the whole madness part for me. We took on the actual modern day manifestation of evil, who was killing young girls and stringing them up in the streets, and you hear nothing.
No, everyone's forgotten that. No one cares about that anymore.
The legacy of our special forces is being torn down to this. And since then, we've gone on and done so many amazing things. And this is, again, my disgust with the current Defence Force and Defence Department. None of those stories are coming out.
Do you have any more good questions there? Or?
Oh, no, I think we'll wrap it up.
Wrap it up. Well, thank you, Heston, so much for your time and your service.
Pleasure. Thanks for the conversation.
What is that?
Thanks for the conversation.
We hope next time Rukshan sorts it out. So next time we'll give him a bit of practice.
The second half was actually pretty good.
The second half wasn't bad.
Yeah,
we'll just have to delete the first half.
Because, guys, this is on a live stream. We're learning as we're going, so it's a learning experience as well.
Guys, Rukshan promised me he knew what he was doing.
I know what I'm doing.
The opposition.show.
He's looking for sympathy.
I'm looking for sympathy.
Don't give it to him. The opposition.show. You can catch up on all the episodes. And by the way that Rukshan's explaining things, it sounds like the second half of every episode will be good.
Yeah. That's right. 100%.
Thank you, Heston.
Thanks, Heston.
We'll keep in touch and send our love to your entire community. They are definitely in my thoughts.
Yeah, you got a lot of comments from veterans on your thing, so thank you for their service, and thanks for the opportunity to have this relatively balanced chat, guys. Appreciate it.
Thanks, mate. Thanks, everyone. Signing off for now.
Bye.